Hey guys, Maju up here, and welcome to the first video in our Let's Learn Java series. In this series, I'm going to take you through how to program in Java. Now, I want to keep this series as simple as can be, so we're not going to be using any IDEs, which an IDE is a integrated development environment. Instead, we're going to be using good old Notepad for our development. Now, to start off, if you've never programmed in Java, which is what the series is for, you're going to need to download the JDK, or the Java Development Kit. This allows your computer to compile Java code. So you can get it here from Oracle. You just type in JDK, you'll find it immediately. It's usually the first result. You just download it for your appropriate operating system and install. Once you have that, we're ready to go. So, what we're going to do is we're going to make a folder. I prefer on my desktop. I already got one right here. And we're going to create our first program in Java. Okay? Now, let's make a new text document. We got to name it. I'm going to name it tutorial. Right? This is going to be changed here a little bit in a second. But we're going to call it tutorial. Right? I'm going to make my font just a little bit bigger. Make you guys easier to see. And we're going to make our first program. That's probably big enough. Alrighty, so before I start, I like to talk about a little bit like what is Java. Java is a programming language that is sort of interpreted, sort of not. So there's things that are called interpreted languages and core languages. So like C++, when you compile it, it compiles it straight to binary code. For Java, Java is compiled into byte code, which isn't assembly. It's a special kind of code that runs in a virtual environment. Okay, so the beauty with Java is because it's compiled to bytecode and not assembly code, you can take that bytecode, which runs in a Java environment, so you compile it once, and then you have the environments are specifically made for individual operating systems. So code that runs on Windows will also run on Mac. That's one of the beauties of Java, where like with C++, if you make something to run with Windows, it's usually not going to work on a Mac. So you have to compile it differently. You have to change the code around. For Java, the whole idea behind Java was that ain't going to happen. That's why Java is on like every device. It works on Windows, works on Mac, works on Linux, works on your phone, because the environment that it runs in is specific to that device, where the Java code is universal. So yeah, and reasons you want to learn Java, well, you can make games, which is the whole idea like behind my videos. I make games. It's kind of the whole reason I learned Java. And what I'm going to be teaching, this is going to be learning Java but game orientated. And you'll learn it in college. I'm currently a college student, and Java is the main language that they're using to teach us. So it's useful if you plan on going to uni for programming to already know it before you even go in. So let's begin, shall we? So I'm going to put some code on your screen here, and it's going to look weird, but I'm going to explain it after I'm done typing it out. All right? Just follow along for the time being. Everything will make sense. Alright. I'm gonna call it game over instead of hello world, because we're doing a video game oriented series, right? Now, what is this? What did I just type? It may look really weird, it may look complicated. It's not. It's very simple. I'm gonna go through and explain what you're seeing here, okay? First off, when a program starts, the program needs to know where it's going to start. And in Java, in all programming languages, is usually the area where it starts is called the main method, right? So we created our main here, right? This is our main. This is the starting point of our program. All programs need a starting point. So this is our main, okay? Now we got these packed in front of the main, public, static, void. What does that even mean? They're all modifiers to our main. It just describes the main even more. So public, anyone can see it. That's important. Java needs to be able to see it. If this was private, it wouldn't work. Couldn't see it. Static. Static is a term that refers to memory locations. Now, when you we're getting a little bit of memory understanding here. So when you create variables, which we'll get into, it's like memory locations. When you start a program, the memory location will change every time you start a program. Now, if you say that it's static memory never changes location. So by saying that it's static, it's always going to start at the same location. It's always going to be the same point in memory that this is stored. Void, now, this methods, there's also things called functions, and functions return items. So like, say you have like an addition function. You give it two numbers and you expect a number as the result. You would return it here. But our main method doesn't return anything, so we call it void. Which basically means, don't give us anything, give us nothing. Void, you know? Now, in here, we have strings inside of a parentheses here after it. These are what are known as parameters. This is what we're going to be giving it. So we're going to give it string and arguments. All right. So a string, that's an object type. Arguments, that's just the name. We could call this potato squash, and it would still work. It's just standard to call it args. I'm gonna leave it as potato squash. And then these brackets here make it an array, which that's a little bit more complex, and we'll be getting into that when we get more into variables. But an array is a bunch of variables. Okay. Now we have brackets. Now brackets are important. These brackets right here, they basically are like, they divide up our code. Okay, and it also assigns this code to this method, right? When you make a method, it's going to be looking for the brackets to go, okay, what code belongs inside of it? So by putting these brackets here, we're saying this belongs to it. We can't actually put codes outside of those brackets. It will have problems, okay? And then we system that out, that print line game over. So what this is going to do is it's going to take our system, it's going to take our output, it's going to print a line. What ln means, it means line, it means return character. It's going to type out game over and then press enter. Right? And this is a string, right? Like our string here. This is actually a string because it's in quotes. The quotes are important. Quotes denotes it as it's a string of text. Right? Now this isn't actually complete code here. We actually need to put it inside of a class. This is just our first method. So this isn't going to compile. If we try to compile it, it's going to fail. All code needs to be in a class. So like, otherwise it's just code floating out in nowhere's land, and that's useless. Code out in nowhere's land is useless. So I'm going to make a public, and now to make a class, it needs to be the same name as the folder, as the file. It needs to be the exact same name, capitalized and all. So we'd call this tutorial. Oh, if I can type. We're going to call it tutorial. And guess what? We need to give it brackets because we need to say what's inside of our class. Right? Now this looks ugly. Okay? So I'm going to fix that by using tabs. Right? You want it to look nice. Tabs are very nice to look at. This looks nice. We're going to leave it like that. Okay? This is also a public class. That's important to note. Not just public. Tutorial, it's public class. So now we denoted our class. Put a method inside of our class, our main, the starting point of our location. All right. I'm going to also talk about, real quick, before we compile this, I'm going to show you how to write comments. Okay. What is a comment? A comment is code or text that doesn't actually get compiled. The compiler just skips over it. So if I want to say, this is a tutorial, right? I put two brackets, two forward slashes in front of it. The compiler will skip over this line saying, don't touch it. It's not code. It's just text. There's also another way you can do this. If you want to do multiple lines at once, you can say star and then end star. And anything between these stars will be considered comments. So like a comment. Me too, right? So these are nice. So for comments, the use of comments is to write actual text into your code for other people to read, and also for yourself if you need to remember things, which is quite handy when your programs get pretty complicated. So we got our comments, we got our class here. Let's compile this and see it working, because that's, we made it. Let's see it work, okay? So I'm gonna go back here. Now this is a .text file. Java doesn't work in .text files, so I actually need to save it as. We're gonna save it, right? Get rid of this little text document selection, select all files. I'm gonna save it as a .java, okay? Now a .java is an uncompiled Java class. All right, so I'm gonna get rid of this real quick, and I'm gonna delete this tutorial because we don't need it anymore. We want the basic one, which we can keep editing it in normal Notepad. Notepad recognizes .javas. Okay, so now we need to compile it. We're gonna make a new text document, and I'm gonna call it compile. Okay, so how do we compile? So when you download the JDK, it should put Java into your path, which your path is just basically you're telling Windows, hey, these are programs that I want you to always keep in mind. But the problem is that sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, and doing that is a pain. So what I like to do is keep it simple, We're going to manually put it in every time we try to compile. So what we're going to do here is you need to find out where it's installed, and it's going to install it in your C drive, usually in program files. Now, it should have installed your JDK, Java, and there's your JDK that you installed. Click on that. We're going to go to bin. And now what we're looking for is we're going to be using Java right here and the Java C. Java C is the compiler, right? We want to tell Windows, hey, Java C is a thing. Remember that. Here it is. Okay. Now what we need to do is we need to get the address for it, which is up here. If you click here, it'll give you the path to the bin folder. What we want. We're going to copy that. We want to remember that. We want to tell our computer, hey, remember that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell it to path, and in quotation marks, I'm going to put that path. Right? So what I'm doing right now is I'm writing a batch file. And what a batch file is, command prompt, like CMD, you type in CMD into your search bar, you get this nice command prompt. Well, what a batch file is CMD commands, right? When we're going to run this compile file, it's going to open up command prompt, and it's going to type in path, and it's going to type this all in for us without us having to do it, okay? So you can path it, and then what we're going to do, right, is now we're going to compile, right? So now we told it, hey, we have programs here, remember that. Let's tell it to compile. So, right, I told you we're going to use the Java C. I'm going to say Java C, and now we're going to compile our tutorial.java, right? Important right there. Now, since we're using a compile, we're going to be using the compile batch file. The batch file, the handy thing about batch files is when it starts up command prompt, it sets the directory for the commands in the same folder that the batch file was launched from. Now, so we can just type Java tutorial.java because it already knows it's going to be here. Otherwise, we'd have to do this to make sure that it knew what we're talking about. But because we're going to be launching it from the same directory, we don't need that. Makes it handy. And then at the very end, I want it to pause. Now, in command prompt, when you pause, Basically, once it executes these 2 lines of code, it's going to close the command prompt. By saying pause, I'm going to tell it, do not close the command prompt until I tell it to. Which, sometimes when it compiles, if we have an error, I want to be able to read the error, otherwise it'll just close immediately and it won't tell you what the error was. So now I'm going to save this, but I'm going to save it as, see, we don't want a .text, we want to save it as a .bat, aka a Windows batch file. Okay, I'm going to close that out, and I'm going to get rid of the .text. We don't need it anymore. We got the batch file. Now, when I run the compile, it'll run. See how it typed in our code for us? Then it paused. Now, if there was an error in between this Javac tutorial.java and the pause, the error would have said what the problem was, but it didn't, so we can close it out. And now, if you look back in our folder, we now have a Java. We have a tutorial.class, and a .class is a compiled class. Java is uncompiled, class is compiled. We can now run our class. Now to run our class, we're going to make a new batch. I'm just going to copy the compile. We're going to rename it. We're going to copy it and rename it, not delete it, to run. And we'll edit it, not print. If I can click, we're going to edit it. And editing, running it's even easier. We don't need to path it. We just need to say Java.tutorial. We don't need the .java because we're using a class, and the class doesn't need to be .class. And I also want to pause still, just in case. So we're going to do that. And now we're going to run. And hey, right? It ran our class, said game over, and it ended. And because we said pause, it's waiting for our key press. If we didn't say pause, I'll just demonstrate what happens. If we don't pause, this will be your result. It just flashes in front of the screen. Can't read it. Keep hitting print. Edit that. If you say pause, though, you'll be able to read what it says because you paused. Right? There's a boom. We got that. Get some other minor things out of the way I want to get out of the way here in the first episode. Minor things. So you see there's a lot of white space here between these. White space in coding means absolutely nothing. Okay? You can have as much white space in between things as you want. You can space things out. I wouldn't do that, but you can space things out a bunch. White space means nothing, because when it compiles it, it'll put it all basically on one line, and it'll it'll run. So it'll just take these, puts it here, puts it there. It'll put it all onto one line. So white space doesn't mean anything. White space is for the programmer's use. Use it. It's very useful to have white space in between your code. Now there are some different ideas and different styles of how you want to do your white space. I like this style of brackets. There are people, and a lot of people, usually the default way of coding is to have your brackets like this. I mean, it makes the code shorter, but I think it makes it uglier. That's just my personal opinion. I don't like this style. I like having my brackets down a line like that. I think that looks nicer. Personal opinion. It makes the file longer. Means you have to scroll more, but you know, it looks nicer. It's easier to read, so I prefer to do that. That's how I'm going to be coding. So yeah, I think I covered everything I want to cover, right? So we can keep printing out. You can play around with this, see what you can print out, you know. Well, I can type. Like, show you. Yo. See, you need to have brackets. I'll show you what an error looks like, and I'll show you why the brackets are important. See how I just typed yo here? These quotes. Let's just type yo. I'm gonna save it. Let's compile. What happens? Oh no, we had an error. So let's read the error. Error cannot find symbol yo. It has no idea what yo is. It thinks yo is a variable, but yo, we wanted it to be a string of characters, right? It doesn't recognize that unless we put in those quotation marks. By having the quotation marks, it'll be able to recognize, hey, this is a string, not some kind of variable. Type that in, all right? Also, to note here where it says Java tutorial 11, that 11 is actually the line of text that the error occurred on. So if you're having difficulty finding your error, so like this is one line, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. You see how that works? So this is 11. This is our 11th line. That's where the error occurred. That's handy to know for finding your problems in your code. Okay? So now that we changed it, we're going to save. I'm going to compile it again. And hey, we didn't have any problems, and I run it. And it says game over, and it says yo, and then it ends. Right? Very simple. Easy to understand. I know this was a lot of information, and I kind of threw it all at you all at once. But it's kind of little things I got through today, like comments and white spaces. That's important to know. Oh, also, another small little thing to note is programs, they move from top to bottom. That is very important to note. So it'll always go game over, then yo. It goes from top down, never bottom up. The code will never go from bottom to up. It's just a small thing, but it's always handy to note, hey, always going top down. So what happens above happens first, and then what happens below happens next. Code does not execute at the same time. It's not printing game over and yo at the same time. It's doing game over, then it's doing yo. Okay? Just a small note about how programs run. So I hope I got a lot of information out at you. Next episode will be not that much. Should be hopefully you're understanding what I put out. If not, as the videos go on, it should become more clear as to what's going on. So, yeah. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Comment, rate, subscribe, and thanks for watching.